All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking a trip back in time to medieval India, but we're going to see it through the eyes of three very different people. We're going to explore how one single country can look like three completely different worlds, all depending on who's doing the looking.
So, yeah, that's the big question we're tackling today. How is that even possible? Well, we're going to dive into the actual accounts of three legendary travelers who all journeyed to India between the 10th and 17th centuries. And let me tell you, their stories could not be more different.
Okay, so let's meet our guides for this journey. First up, we've got Al-Biruni, a super meticulous scholar from way back in the 11th century. Then, fast forward 300 years, and you get the globe-trotting adventurer Ibn Battuta. And finally, from the 17th century, we have a critical European doctor, Francois Bernier. You gotta understand, each one of these guys brought their entire worldview with them.
All right, let's start with our first lens, Al-Biruni. Now, this guy, he didn't just visit India. No, he approached it like a massive, complex scientific study. He was absolutely determined to understand it from the inside out.
And you can see just how methodical his mind was. His masterpiece, the Kitab-u-Hind, is structured with what historians actually call geometric precision. I mean, every single one of its 80 chapters follows this exact three-step pattern. It probably has a lot to do with his background in mathematics, which is just, wow.
But, his research was definitely not a walk in the park. Al-Biruni was super clear about the challenges he ran into, and he lays out these three major barriers. First, he found Sanskrit incredibly difficult, especially compared to Arabic and Persian. Then, the sheer diversity of beliefs was just overwhelming. And finally, he felt the local population was pretty insular and not really willing to share their knowledge.
So he dives into the caste system, this really rigid social hierarchy where you're born into a specific group. But there was one thing he just could not wrap his head around, this idea of permanent ritual impurity. He's looking at it from a scientific perspective, right? He argues that everything in nature purifies itself. The sun cleans the air, the salt in the sea cleans the water. So how, he wondered, could a person ever be considered permanently polluting? It just didn't compute for him. Okay, so fast forward 300 years, and Ibn Battuta arrives on the scene. And this guy is the polar opposite of our detached scholar. He's an insatiable adventurer, completely driven by what he could see and experience, not just what he could read in books. And man, what a journey it was. We're talking traveling all the way across North Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia, before he even got to India in 1333. His reputation actually preceded him, so much so that the Sultan of Delhi, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, made him a judge. And his travels didn't stop there, not by a long shot. He was even sent as an envoy all the way to China. What I love about his writing is that he was fascinated by things a local might not even give a second look. It just shows this constant sense of wonder he had. He wasn't just observing from a distance, he was experiencing it all. He describes things like the coconut and the pan leaf, which were totally new to him, with such vivid imaginative detail. You can really feel his curiosity. So through his eyes, India's cities were just bursting with life and opportunity. He saw Delhi as this place where if you had skill and some resources, you could absolutely make a fortune. He talks about these crowded streets and these huge, colorful markets that weren't just for buying and selling. No, they were social and cultural hubs, buzzing with music, dance, temples, and mosques. He was also just completely blown away by how efficient the communication network was. This postal relay system was incredible. A message could travel from Sindh to Delhi in just 5 days. To put that in perspective, that same journey took him 50 days. And get this, the dawa, which was the footpost with runners and a tight relay, was actually faster than the uluk, the horse post. How amazing is that? All right, now for our final traveler, our final lens. We're jumping to the 17th century with Francois Bernier. He was a French doctor, and he came to Mughal India, this incredibly powerful empire ruling the subcontinent, looking for opportunities. But he saw the country through a very different and way more critical European perspective. For Bernier, everything boiled down to one thing: the lack of private land ownership. He was constantly comparing India to Europe, which a lot of European thinkers did back then, and in his mind it was simple. Because the king owned all the land, nobody had any reason to take care of it or improve it. He was convinced this one single fact was the root cause of all the misery and agricultural decline he saw. And oh man, he did not hold back.
He actually dedicated his work to the King of France, basically using India as a cautionary tale for his own country. He painted this super grim picture, talking about contaminated cities and overgrown fields. He even called the powerful Mughal emperor a mere king of beggars and barbarians. Ouch. But hang on a second. This picture of a desolate, collapsing land is the complete opposite of what Ibn Battuta described, right? The bustling cities, the rich agriculture, the profitable trade. It really makes you wonder, were they even visiting the same country? So who was right? And this is where it all starts to click. These dramatic differences in their stories, they actually tell us less about what India was really like and a whole lot more about the travelers themselves, their backgrounds, their biases, and why they were writing in the first place. Okay, let's go back to Bernier's main argument about land ownership. If you look at the actual Mughal sources from the time, like from the court historian Abul Fazl, they directly contradict him. They make it clear that the emperor didn't own the land itself. He claimed a share of the crop as a tax, and that tax was seen as a payment for providing security and stability. That's a huge, huge distinction. And here's the really interesting part. Bernie even contradicts himself. In one breath, he's saying artisans have no reason to work hard, but in the next, he's admitting that a massive amount of the world's gold and silver was flowing into the Mughal Empire to pay for Indian goods. I mean, you can't have it both ways. Those two things just don't add up. And check this out. In the 17th century, about 15% of India's population lived in cities. Now, that might not sound like a huge number to us today, but it was actually a higher rate of urbanization than in most of Western Europe at that time. That one fact alone kind of blows a hole in Bernier's idea that Indian cities were just desolate camp towns. So what's the big takeaway here? It's that each traveler saw India through their own unique lens. Al-Biruni had the lens of a meticulous scholar, hunting for systematic knowledge. Ibn Battuta had the lens of a curious adventurer, looking for anything new and exciting. And Bernier? He had the lens of a critical European, constantly comparing everything to back home, and basically looking for what was wrong. And this really gets at a fundamental truth about history itself. It's not that any of these travelers were necessarily wrong or that they were lying. It's just that none of them saw the whole picture. Their perspectives were totally shaped by who they were. And it's only when we piece all these conflicting stories together that we start to see a much richer, more complex, and honestly, a more fascinating picture of what medieval India was like. And all of this leaves us with one final question to think about. If their views of the very same place could be so radically different, what lenses are we looking through right now? How are our own backgrounds and beliefs shaping our understanding of the world today? Something to think about. Thanks for joining this explainer.